Hi guys, Jason here. First up, Happy New Year. And let's hope that 2022 is a good one. Last week I picked up this Marshall Plexi. It's a 50 watter. It's from 1969, which is older than I am just. Right, so it's 52 years old. It's a real Plexi. It's got a plexiglass front on it. And when it came up on the market, I was pretty excited to see it. It's the tremolo circuit, right? It's a 1987T. This one has had a lot done to it over its life, but it's still got original transformers, some other original components. The pots all look completely stock. Some of the resistors are original as well. Before I purchased this thing, I sent a bunch of pictures to Dave Friedman to have a look at. And very kindly, Dave gave me some advice and thought that, yeah, this was a good deal. You should move forward with it, right? So the plan with this old amp is to restore it. I want to make this thing as original to its original spec as possible, notwithstanding that the tremolo circuit will never come back. This will just be a 1987 50 watt Plexi. So this clip will be part one of many, right? It's going to be, I don't know how many installments, right? But this is going to be a bit of a journey. We're going to source some new old stock parts, I'm going to try to, and piece by piece, I will move this thing forward. The plan is to kind of make this, surprise, surprise, an EVH spec late 60s Plexi, right? So it's a 1969 model, and I want to kind of get this to a 50 watt 68 in terms of filtering, and the component setup. In part one, today's video, we're going to do some introductory tones, so literally as the amp, kind of as it is, and I'll take it out to the bench and we'll have a look inside, and I'll take a bunch of measurements with respect to voltages to see what our starting point is. Right, I've got the JMP plugged in here. I am coming into the normal channel. We'll save the best to last, right? I'll do what I normally do with the Plexi. I've just got everything dimed on 10 here, presence-based metal treble. We'll worry about tweaking that later. And I've got a my Ritchie Kotzen tally set up here. Let's just hear this normal channel. Bit of scratchiness in that pot, to be expected with an amp like this. I suspect these pots haven't been serviced in any way, shape or form. Yeah, pretty creaky through there. Alright, well, it's making noise. Let's go over to treble channel. What's going on here? Hang on. Okay, we've got noise. Yeah, she's scratchy as. Doesn't sound terrible, that's for sure. Up to 8. Up to 9. Let's go all the way to 10. It's a pretty promising start for a 69 Plexi that needs some work on it. Right, so it's functioning, no doubt about that. That sounds pretty killer straight out of the gate there. So I think we can only improve it from here. Right, so we got this old Plexi out of its head cap, and I've had a little bit of a chance to start looking through it. So, some observations. This amp would have been originally shared cathode, right, on V1. So both cathodes on the V1 preamp tube for both triodes would have been tied together and simply would have been through this cathode setup here, which is an 820 ohm resistor and 330 microfarad bypass cap. So this has been added. So we've got a 0.68 microfarad bypass cap here and a 2K7 resistor. That's been hot glued onto the board upside down as a mounting point for the 2K7 and then run directly to the cathode here. I can see the grid has got a 33K resistor on it, which is also not stock. Tropical Fish. These are, I think, the Philips old caps, not the original mustards, right? So I'm going to be searching for new old stock mustards. I want to restore this to a 68 spec, basically. So we're going for an EVH spec 68 here in 50 watt mode. That's also non-stacked, a polycarb Philips 22 nanofarad cap, along with the 22s here. Some of these resistors look stock, some of them look like they've been replaced, but these are still old resistors. So I'll check all the values on these, right? If they all check out, they'll all stay. Right, there's no worries there at all. This looks like this arrangement here has been kind of, it's definitely not factory. I think these amps, right, the 87 tremolo model particularly, would have, pretty sure it'd have a can cap mounted on the side here. You can see where the chassis is drilled for that. So the 3 can caps, and you know, you've got your mains, filter, screens and phase inverter, and the 2 screen caps for the preamp would be the 3rd cap, and maybe the preamp would be off this guy and screens and phase inverter off this guy, but the 3 can caps there. Obviously in more modern day 50 watts or latter day 50 watt Marshalls, you'd have your 2 can caps here, and the 3rd one would be under the board mounted on top of the chassis. Moving right along, this 0.1 microfarad here, which is on the other side of the phase inverter, and also where the negative feedback comes in. That's not stock. It looks like the same cap. You probably can't see it on the video. I'll tilt this a little bit. The same 0.1 microfarad here on the presence. Again, these would have been mustards originally. By the way, these treble peaker caps here, the treble cap here, they look original, right? So interestingly, the tone stack on this 1987T is a 250 picofarad with a 56K slope resistor. Okay, standard lead spec amp, you'd have 500 picofarad and 33k. So probably will revert that, well not revert it, but change that to standard lead spec tone stack. 100 picofarad cap here. It looks original because it looks old. It's been moved from the pot to the board. 100 picofarad's okay. I'm kind of okay with that. These phase inverter couplers here, 0.047, definitely not stock, right? They're going to come out. These are going to go to, 0.022, right? And again, I'll be searching for some new old stock mustards to put in here. If I can't get the mustards that I'm looking for, I'm going to use Synergy caps instead. Actually sent pictures of this to Dave Friedman, asking for his advice on it before I purchased it. Showed him the transformers and so on. And Dave was very kind and generous to give me some advice and some feedback. We discussed what to do about these caps in here, and he also agreed that the Synergies would be a good option if I struggled to find the mustards I was looking for. This resistor here, 10k, right? This is the dropper from the screen supply node, which is here. Right, you can see this yellow wire coming off this side here, and this yellow wire you can see taps into here, and the yellow wire, it goes to that can cap. That's the 50 microfarad filter cap for the screen supply, and then it comes off that other turret there and goes, via these screen resistors, which are again definitely not stock. These 1k 5 watt resistors set up for the screen supply, the screen pins on these power tubes off this screen node here, right? So 10k dropper to the phase inverter supply. I will change this, right? So we'll go through and check the voltages in here, but this will end up being somewhere in the vicinity of 16 to 20k, I'm guessing, because if you check the plate voltage here, right? But if this is a 450, 460 volt plate voltage, then my phase inverter supply here is going to be too high. I'm looking for 315 volts on the phase inverter node, give or take. So we'll have a look at that. These bias caps here, bias filter caps, are definitely not stock, have been replaced. So I mean, they kind of look okay. If they're functioning, they'll be fine. I'll leave them alone. Solid state rectifier here put onto a tag strip. Again, that's not stock. That would have been probably on the original board here. This board looks like it might have been changed out at some point, because the tremolo amps, the board extended a bit longer because it had a bunch of components to set up for the tremolo function on the amp. And if I tilt the chassis that way, you'll see those two pots at the end there, these two pots unused, and they would have been, that's the speed and the depth of the original tremolo. So it's been, it's the standard 1987 50 watt circuit now, and I've measured these pots already. This is pretty close to a 2 meg pot, and you can see if you go and look at the 1987T scheme, you'll see there's a 2 meg pot. This one's a 50k, and it measures 50k. I've checked it from the two outer lugs. This is probably going to become my new mid pot, because an EVH spec Plexi, as you probably know, had a 50k mid pot, not a 25k. I haven't even measured these pots yet, but my guess is this will be a stock 25k mid. This one here. So that's probably going to come out, and I'll swap it with this one. So nice to have an old stock pot there that I can use as a 50k in my mid position. This was this 12AX7 Novel socket here, which I can see the heaters are still wired to it, unused now. This was for the tremolo, right? So these amps had standard preamp arrangement, V1, V2 with a cathode follower, phase inverter. This was the tremolo circuit.
obviously not used now. So look, you know, that could be used for modding. It's not going to happen on this amp. This is a 1969, 1987 T, and it's going to be restored. It's not going to be modded. Well, it's going to be restored to a late 60s 50 watt Plexi. That's what it's going to happen. This cap here, this will be, I'm going to look at the arrangement here, but it's on the standby switch, right? So that'll be set up to stop. It's probably had a spike, you know, like an audible pop coming through the speaker when you flick the standby. That often takes a spike away. Just takes that spike off and sets it to ground. Saves your ears a bit. Let's check some voltages. Okay, the amp's at a standby. I've dialed up exactly 240 volts here on my Variac, on the mains supply. Okay, let's see where our plates are at. Right, so straight to pin 3. Yeah, cool. All right, that's pretty healthy, yeah. 457. Now, you can see on these guys, right, there is a 1 ohm resistor to ground that's been set on the cathodes here. I often don't trust these if they're old because the 1 ohm will drift. So I'm not going to bother really using that to check the bias current. I'll use my probe, and I'll measure these separately, probably pull them out anyway. I'm going to put this back to kind of stock. I'll just set those to ground. I'm not going to bother with the 1 ohm resistors because this is my amp. It's a keeper. Screen pin. Right, so we've got a little voltage drop there, which is exactly what we'd expect from the plate to the screens on the power tubes. All right, which is exactly what we would expect. Here is our supply node for the screens. All right, and this is our supply node for the plates. All right. The difference between that reading, 459, and the reading actually on the plate of the power tube is that current is flowing through the primary side of the output transformer. So you do get a little voltage drop, you know, 1 volt, give or take, maybe 2 volts from the filter cap reservoir to the actual plate on the power tube. Right, back to our screen supply node here. Now, I did say that I suspected that a 10k dropper here is not going to be enough to get me where I want. I want 315 volts on the phase inverter supply. It's the rule of thumb. I also know from the last Tone Talk episode, where again Dave Friedman very generously gave up information about Ed's Plexi and said that at 120 volts on the main supply, he had 317, or was it 315? 317 volts. I actually had 315 in my head already because Joey on Slow Clone forums had already recommended and suggested on a number of threads, particularly one that I was asked him a bunch of questions on, that in a 2204, 2203, let's call it a 1987 or a 1959 as well, and that, you know, these old Marshall circuits, you want to get your phase inverter node at about, you know, somewhere in the kind of 310 to 330 range, you know, somewhere in there. You can run higher, like this is 370, right? We can see it's too high for me, but it means that all the voltages across the preamp are going to be higher or high as well, and it just causes the amp to be a bit, I don't know, strident is a good word. I've heard Dave use that word on Tone Talk. I agree with it. It's kind of a bit harsh, a bit brittle perhaps, not as sweet sounding. And looking back on some original late 60s 50 watt schematics, again the Amp Archives website, I think I found some really good information there. These would have often 2 8.2Ks, right? So what's that? 16.4K dropper. Let's move through the rest of these nodes. So let's have a look here. Okay, yeah, 375. So that's phase inverter supply. Here's the phase inverter supply still. And then here's a 10k dropper, 317, which is going to V2. Right, so this is the supply node for, and you can see this blue wire here that'll be running off that to the plate of cathode follower. And then this 100k resistor is the plate resistor for V2A. So what do we got here? All right, so those are both coming off that. And another 10k dropper. And this on this side, a little bit backwards I guess, but anyway, it's fine. Here's the supply node for V1. Right, so if we trace this, this will be the voltage that's right here, 296. Right, so there's our two 100k plate resistors that are setting up the plates for V1A and V1B. Okay, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust that, and I'll get our voltages to where we want them. It's probably all I'll do for now. I might, look, the things that I can do, here's what I can do before I get my mustard caps, coupling cap replacements in place. I can get our voltage here sorted. I'll probably change out this 2K7 for an 820, which is per late 60s spec on a split cathode amp. I'll get rid of that 33k grid resistor there. I'm definitely going to check all the resistances of these various resistors, right? Make sure nothing has drifted too far away. We're going to have to do something about this tone stack because I want that standard lead spec. This 50k pot here is going to go in as a mid pot. I reckon that's as far as I can go before I get these coupling caps. Oh, one other thing. I will look at the screen, have a think about what I'm going to do with respect to this can cap here, because these both are, they're dual 50 microfarad can caps, right? So this one's bridged in parallel, so it's 100 microfarad mains, right? Screen supply's got a 50 microfarad and the phase inverter has got a 50 microfarad. You see this brown wire? Well, you can see where it's going to. Brown wire's going to the other side of this dropper here, right? So this is phase inverter filter cap, and the yellow one we already spoke about. That's off to the other side. I did a recent video, literally a couple of weeks ago, where in a my other 1987, it's a JCM 800 series, 1983 vintage, 83, but it's a 1987 circuit. It's a 50 watt Plexi, and I changed out the 50 plus 50 microfarad filter cap here for a 16 plus 16, and 16 microfarad on the screens is pretty awesome. And so I reckon I'm going to do that, and we'll think about what I do with the phase inverter, because I'd like to have the phase inverter filter back up at 50 rather than at 16, but we'll see about that. So those are things I can do in advance of actually changing out these coupling caps.
Well, that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Stick around for part 2 and whatever comes after that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then please do ring the bell. You'll be notified of new content. I'll catch you later.